You're watching World Inside with me, Tian Wei. Coming up, a bridge between the East and the West through his work in film, movie director Malcolm Clarke with insights on how to better angels with each other. Next.
We were trying to make a film that advocated for more understanding and more cooperation between China and the United States.
You're watching World Inside with me, Tian Wei. Today, China is still a mystery to some people from the West. That's what Malcolm Clarke, a two-time Oscar-winning director, said recently about how the world sees China. Originally from the UK, the renowned director has a dream of building a bridge with films connecting China and the rest of the world. Having worked in the film industry for 40 years, Clarke traveled around the world to shoot documentaries. He has been filming in China since 1913. His work, Better Angels, is significant in many's eyes for trying to bridge the divide between China and the United States. I earlier interviewed him about that movie, but recently I met him again in Guangzhou, one of the very first city open to the rest of the world in China. And our conversation began from the stories after the movie Better Angels. Mr. Clarke.
It's been a long time.
Better Angels.
Yes.
That was the time when we met.
I remember that, yes.
Pleasant conversation. And you travel with all these families between the United States and China to tell their stories. Things are changing so fast, Mr. Clarke.
Things are changing fast, but you know what happened at the end of Better Angels was that we found that we were kind of on the wrong side of history.
China is in so many ways becoming what we sort of imagine ourselves to be. People go to China to get a glimpse of the future now when it comes to infrastructure and technology. And for us in the United States, that's threatening.
We were trying to make a film that advocated for more understanding and more cooperation between China and the United States. And we found very much that, I mean, when we started the film, Trump was campaigning. When we were shooting the film, Trump was in the White House. And we found that the temperature was raised on the kind of animosity between the two countries, and Trump did everything in his power to amp up the antagonism and use China as a scapegoat for American problems. So that was a difficult period for us because, you know, I mean, I don't think we were crazy to think that the world's superpower and the world's nascent superpower should try and work together. It seemed like common sense.
Yes.
But
because the opposite would be very dangerous.
Because the opposite would be unthinkable. So, and so to some extent now what we're living with is the unthinkable, which is that the two nations are at loggerheads, and it's terribly sad because, you know, we met so many wonderful people who were invested in trying to bring China and the United States closer together. So it was just difficult.
Did you follow up with their stories? You know, just not necessarily shooting another movie, but just to know how they are functioning under the current circumstances.
Yes.
You know, the students, the workers. To
some extent it was, you know, it's always, it's a challenge for a documentary filmmaker to stay in touch with all the people you meet, but there are some people who we know, for example, one story which I think is an example which speaks volumes. There was a man a Chinese man who bought a house that Xi Jinping slept in and stayed in during one of his visits to the United States. The Chinese man bought that house and wanted to turn it into a museum to bring Chinese people to America, to show them more about America, to explain more about America. It was a very good idea, and it was a very simple idea, and it went nowhere because the prevailing kind of political currents were very much in the opposite direction, and he kind of went out of business. So it was sad to see that, and I think that's what's happened generally. There's been a kind of souring of the atmosphere between the two countries.
What does it mean for an artist like you?
Well, it means that I decided not to give up on China. I found the country so fascinating, and when I see how far China has come in such a short amount of time, and how deeply China is misunderstood in the West, I decided to stay and do whatever. And I'm not naive. I understand that one man making a film every couple of years is not going to change the world. But I think the narrative needs to be changed, and people need to understand more about China and about the Chinese people, because that's something that very rarely gets into the Western press. We talk about China's technological achievements. We talk about Chinese IP theft and all these hot button issues that people love to feature. But in fact, this extraordinary transformation that has happened here has happened through millions of people working really hard for 30, 40 years and transforming basically a rural agrarian society into a extremely technologically sophisticated superpower.
You've been since then making several documentaries about China, always on hot button issues, about Hong Kong, about people's understanding of ordinary Chinese. So tell us how you chose your topic. How do you have access to these stories, which it seems that has been the topic between China and the United States, for example?
What I decided to do after Better Angels, because I really do passionately believe that China is misunderstood and victimized. And certainly China makes mistakes. We all know that. Every country makes mistakes. And I'm not trying to avoid that. But the point is that China is much more than just the mistakes that it occasionally makes. I have a kind of a kind of odd position, because I very much try to look for the subjects which I know China is going to, which are going to be global subjects. So after we made Better Angels, I went to Hong Kong and I made a film about the turmoil in Hong Kong. Before we even finished the Hong Kong film, I went to Wuhan, and I stayed in Wuhan with a crew of 18 international filmmakers, because I knew that COVID-19 was a perfect opportunity for China's enemies to attack China. And I wanted to see what it was really like and what was happening. And we stayed all the way until the lockdown was lifted. I couldn't get people to go because they were too frightened. And finally, we took people who ordinarily work in war zones, people who have a higher level of
sophistication about emergencies
and a higher tolerance for risk. And so we went in with the understanding that we did not know when we could come out. If we went in, they weren't going to let us out when we said, okay, we want to leave now. We were there for as long as it was going to be necessary to be there. So we could not leave until after the lockdown was finished, and we stayed for many, many, many weeks. But it was an extraordinary experience.
I know your documentary showed a lot, but beyond the stories that you told, as a filmmaker, as someone who lived in a city like that, and comparing to the rhetorics that is being reported now about China in Wuhan,
I think that the big takeaway for me was two or three things, really. First of all, I know that no one wanted to get locked up in their communities for week upon week upon week. Nobody would like that, and of course people were upset about that. But unlike in the West, the people of Wuhan trusted their government. And their government, which is hugely important, trusted their scientists. And because they trusted their scientists and locked down a city of 11 million people, they saved China. Because, you know, this is a country of 1.4 billion people. Less than 5,000 people died. It's a tragedy that 5,000 people died. But when you compare that to the United States, where 780,000 people are dead and counting, China's achievement was extraordinary. And it was because China deployed huge state capacity very quickly. 42,000 doctors and nurses, over 40,000 construction workers, and they came within days. And it was just unimaginable to someone from the West to see that level of commitment by the Chinese people. And, you know, a lot of the people we were filming every day in the ICUs were 22-year-old nurses, 28-year-old doctors, very, very young people who had volunteered and come. And they were intrepid, they were fantastic. So it showed the best.
But listening to you, you know, someone from outside this country who haven't been here for years would say, is Mr. Clarke now trying to do propaganda for China?
No, I don't. I think my position is very precarious because the one thing that I found out in Better Angels was if you don't criticize China, overtly criticize China, then you must be bought and paid for by China. There's no middle ground.
Were there a lot of accusations against you about that then?
There were too many for me to enjoy it. It was, you know, I mean, where are you getting your money? I mean, that film was financed by Americans. You know, it was not financed by China. We took no money from China, and we don't take money from China. I think I have to remain independent, but I do know that there's a school of thought that says you are either anti-China or you're pro-China, but you can't just be in the middle and try and make a balanced, unbiased account of what you see and what happens. And, you know, and as I say, I criticize China all the time, but what I try to do very hard is to be constructive. And you know, any country that says it's utopia is deluded. China is not a utopia. No country is. People make mistakes. Politicians make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But somehow China gets, in my opinion, gets unfairly hoist on its own petard for things that would be passed in other countries.
That's my interview with Malcolm Clarke, a documentary filmmaker who's trying to tell the story as he sees it. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my teams in Guangzhou and in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.